Hey guys, my name is Evan, aka s8nph, and I'll be your instructor for today with the ROOTCON 101 village called Path to Pawnage. So this in this 101 session, we'll be covering the basics of pawning machines, how to pawn your first machine, the initial steps, necessary steps that you need to take and that are essential to uh, getting the keys to the kingdom, escalation to root, all of those things. So let's start. Okay, so basically here's the current table of contents that I have over the course of of the training. I'll cover multiple aspects of penetration testing, um, and share a little bit of common vulnerabilities, methodologies, and different technologies that you can use to successfully gain access and gain root to your first box. So over here we have penetration testing, penetration testing and vulnerability assessment, different vulnerabilities, methodologies, and technologies, different tools. Again, these are only some and not going to be all of it, and the usual penetration testing approach. So the penetration testing approach is very important because it's going to be your life cycle on your engagements and on how you're going to pawn your first boxes. All right. So over here we have penetration testing. So what is penetration testing? All right. So penetration testing or pen testing is the practice of testing a system, network, or a web application to find security vulnerabilities that an attacker could exploit. So it's basically assessment, security assessment of a system, network, or web application, so that you can try to discover it first before malicious hackers do. Right. So the goal of penetration testing is to identify weak spots in an organization's security posture. So apart from that, it's also used as a way to measure the compliance of an organization's security policy, test the staff's awareness of security issues, and determine how the company would react to these certain security disasters. So a penetration test can also highlight weaknesses in company security policies. For example, different security policies that focus on preventing and detecting attacks may not be uh, may not be effective if the system or the network is already compromised. So it also helps different organizations to identify what they're lacking and put it in their security roadmap to say that they are at the average level of security maturity that they can ensure their customers that no one they're not going to be compromised that easily. All right. So in brief, we'll have a short explanation about penetration testing versus vulnerability assessment because most people tend to mix up these two. So a vulnerability assessment involves vulnerability identification, use of automated tools. This may not be backed with actual exploitation, It may include false positives. So it's basically kind of an assessment on what possible vulnerabilities there are that are lying in the enterprise system or network or application whatsoever. So there's going to be a lot of false positives, most likely because it only checks the rules based on a script. Meanwhile, penetration testing has the same elements, but the difference is there are dedicated tools or exploits, and there is an attempt for exploitation. There are also similar proof of concepts that are generated to make sure that um, this serve as evidence that the system has been compromised or is vulnerable to the vulnerability identified. It's proof that the hackers leveraged the vulnerability into gaining access to the machine. All right. So next we'll go to vulnerabilities, methodologies, and the different technologies. So the first and foremost, the definition of a vulnerability. So there are a lot of vulnerability definitions scattered across the internet. Here are some of them. As per the Computer Emergency Response Team, it's regarded as a software defect. As as per the bug bounty platform HackerOne, it's a software bug. As for Microsoft, it's a weakness in the CIA of the application or the system, which means the CIA is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It's also the same definition. It's also a weakness according to the NIST, but it's a weakness in logic, and as per ISACA, it's a weakness in design and in implementation of an application. So there are a lot of vulnerabilities. There are a lot of types of vulnerabilities that you'll encounter sooner or later. But the most common ones are going to be presented here. So you've probably heard a lot of these already since you came to the talk. So first one would be remote code execution. So remote code execution is the execution of commands remotely. So if let's say you compromise the system and you're sending different commands via a vulnerable segment in the application, and it runs operating system level commands or it runs the programming language that you pick. For example, over here in the screenshot, we have a PHP remote code execution example. So as you can see, the PHP code includes echo shell exec, and it gets CMD. So it's CMD because the target is Windows. So it's going to spawn a command prompt. And on the command prompt, of course, most of you all know there are a lot of things to do because it's the equivalent of the terminal in Linux. So the way that this vulnerability works is there's a client and then there's a server, of course. It wouldn't be remote if it's just one-sided. So the client sends a request to the server, and within that request is the command that the client wants the server to execute. So the server then responds with the appropriate command if the remote code execution was successful. Now, we use CMD date to check if the server is actually responding to operating system level commands. and the server returned with the current date. So what if we try to execute a malicious command like dir? So dir lists the directories and files that are in the present working directory on Windows. So it can be used maliciously because it gives an attacker the file structure of the present working directory. Also allows the attacker to crawl around and see uh, whether different files are accessible or whether he can exfiltrate other sensitive data. So assuming that cmd date worked, we'll try cmd dir, which returned the directory contents. So over here, you'll see that there's a directory content called index.php, .html, .text, and another .php file. So remote code execution in general is very simple. You as a client remotely executing code on the server, which shouldn't happen because you don't have authorization. So another example for remote code execution, an actual example, is the Drupal exploit called Drupagadon 2, way back 2017, 2018. So as you can see over here, the exploit is using the echo command to test if remote code execution is exploitable, or the vulnerability is exploitable to against the stack. So as you can see on the highlighted red, the echo command, and on the highlighted yellow, it got the result of the echo command from the CMD. So after that, the tool deemed that this is exploitable for remote code execution. Right. So basically, code execution is very simple. This is just a straightforward example. There are lots of ways of how vulnerabilities are going to be exploited, how you're going to leverage these vulnerabilities. So moving on to the next vulnerability, denial of service. I'm pretty sure you've heard of this a lot because it's one of the most common attacks that anyone can make in the information security industry. So denial of service via resource exhaustion is a type of denial of service which spends the resources of the client or the server in order for it to be inaccessible. Right? So this is a Java applet that basically is a map. So it's downloadable, easy to reverse engineer or decompile. And once you decompile the code, since it's a Java applet, you can use JDGUI or JADX to decompile this and browse the source code. You'll see over here that there's a integer that's tagged with the until carton value. So K1 is also used in the for loop, which is basically going to run depending on the value of the until carton global variable. So what if we change the global variable value to something like 10 million? So the loop is going to run 10 million times before it finishes. 10 million if it's probably something that's computing heavy. It's not going to be an easy task to perform. So it's going to spend resources way rather than the intended. So over here, after changing the value to 10 million, you can see that CPU usage just spiked up to 100%, which means I can't do anything to my computer. Because, the CPU usage is 100. If I'm going to try to do any other thing, it's going to be awfully slow. So basically, I've exhausted my resources upon opening the map application, that I'm not going to be able to access the map. At the same time, I'm not going to be able to access any other application that's readily available to me, because 100% of my CPU has been spent. Over here you can see the proof that it's taking up 98% of the CPU. It's a Java applet. So the way this works is, if we're going to weaponize it, we have, for example, 2 remote users, an attacker, and then of course the web server that serves the application. So the remote users ask for the map. The attacker injects the new high value on the application, right? So he changes the Antal Cardon value to 10 million, which makes the for loop iterate 10 million times. Now, when the web server receives the new value, of course, the remote users that requested the map are going to be shipped out the malicious application that will exhaust their resources. So, once the web server gives the map, of course, the remote users are going to have to deal with their CPUs spiking up to 100% usage, and it exhausts their resources so that they can't use any other application in their computer. So this is a denial of service via resource exhaustion. Basically, it denies the service by spending the client resources instead of just bringing down the web server. Right, so going ahead, we have different tools that make up the usual arsenal. The first one would be nmap. So nmap is pretty important for you, because this is going to be your one of your go-to recon tools. So nmap gives you a high level output of what ports are running, is it open, closed, so the state, what service is running on the specific port, and if it can, it detects what version and what application is running behind that port. Nmap can also return operating systems, users, and many more. Next would be netcat. So netcat is commonly used to interact with different ports and open listeners, or connect to listening ports. Right. So nmap is and netcat is mostly used to open up to make bind shells or reverse shells. So when the target interacts with the attacker, and the attacker interacts with the target, and so on and so forth. So what are these shells? Of course, first one would be bind shell. So a bind shell is kind of like a remote code execution vulnerability. It's very similar, but you're directly interacting with the machine itself. Right, so you can open up shells to access the target remotely and execute codes remotely. So a bind shell works by an attacker sending an exploit to the target, and the exploit would contain something like open port 4444 and serve cmd.exe on that port. And then the target would open that port, and then the attacker would connect to the listening port that his exploit is open. So this is going to be one directional. The attacker is the one that connects to the target, whereas the reverse shell, you also have two clients, but uh, in this scenario, the attacker is the one that opens a listening port and then sends the exploit. Now, the exploit contains um, code that makes the target connect to the attacker's IP and its port. So basically, it's called reverse because the roles are reversed. So the target is the one that connects to the attacker. Right. Next is dirb. So dirb is basically your fuzzer, directory brute forcer for web applications. Dirb is still okay, I guess, but there are a lot of faster alternatives right now, like GoBuster, Dirbuster, and Deer Search, and many more. So if you have a different tool, that's okay. It's not going to matter. I mean, different hackers have different toolkits. To each his own. And tools only help you achieve your goal, and is not going to be a basis of your skill set. It's always going to be how you operate it, how you use it, and what's possible to do with it. Right. So next would be SQL map. So SQL map is an automated SQL injection um, assessment tool. So it tests for vulnerable parameters, vulnerable URLs. It checks whether an application is susceptible to an SQL injection attack. So it's automated, but you can also have these manual flags, and you can also um, put in custom exploits with it. This is usually used for web applications also. Right, next, Hydra. So Hydra is a directory brute forcer. I mean, a brute forcer in general, not just the directory. So it can conduct password sprays. It can conduct brute forcing, login brute forcing. It can also be your directory fuzzer if you want, but mostly it's used for logins. So over here, you can see that it's hooked to connecting to a port A service, and is spraying different login combinations, the username, password. Right, next is OpenVAS. So OpenVAS is an open source vulnerability assessment platform. It's a scanner. So it's a platform that scans for different vulnerabilities, potential vulnerabilities, if I may add, and it gives the user an idea of what possible vulnerabilities there are that exist in the system. So after scanning with OpenVAS, you can try to leverage these different vulnerabilities, try for a POC, or try to execute. But again, you'll have to verify manually, because this is a vulnerability scanner only. It's not going to give you 100% success rate on each vulnerability it detects. Not everything will be exploitable. Some will be false positives. Right. So next is a Swiss knife for web application security testers called Burp Suite. The main function of this is to intercept and tamper with requests. So you can also brute force this using the intruder. You can also easily resend requests using the repeater sequencers. You can also use the coder. You can also use collaborator. So there are a lot of tools within this application that most web application security testers use, and is very vital if you're testing web applications. Right, so next would be Responder. So Responder is mainly used on network penetration testing engagements. It's a NBTNS, LLMNR, and MDNS responder. Can also be used as SMB relays, anti-LM relays, SMB. You can host fake SMB shares to get credentials, and you can try to poison the internal network with it, and try to gain more information about the users, the available SMB shares, which ones access which, etc., etc. Right, so next would be Metasploit. So Metasploit is a platform that is an exploitation platform, right? So it has a collection of different exploits, payloads that you can use to make your life easier. So the exploits are already coded. You just have to set your target and the IP address of where you want the target to connect. If you're using a reverse shell, and many more. So basically, it makes your job easier of exploiting the machine and getting access to it, instead of manually compiling your own code. So if it's already published, readily available, you can just update your Metasploit, pull the new exploits from the database, and see if you can get lucky. Right, so next would be Wireshark. So Wireshark is a packet capture analysis tool. There are a lot of uses for Wireshark. Mainly, number one, for engagements. This can serve as your golden ticket to get out of jail free. So if your testing goes wrong and you're pretty sure that you didn't break anything, you can show them the packet capture. These are the packets I sent. It was not me that brought down the network. These packets are the ones that I sent. This is my source IP, destination IP. Everything is recorded, etc., etc. You can also use this to monitor the responses from different machines. So this is overall this is a very useful tool that can help you and the network level, and it's widely used among network security pen testers. Next would be Hashcat. So Hashcat is a password recovery application. It basically cracks different hashes. You just have to specify the hash type and give it a word list, and depending on your hardware, it's going to crack it really fast or really slow. Right, so next would be Mimikatz. So Mimikatz is a go-to tool for red team practitioners. Mimikatz is what it mainly does is to get credentials, get SIDs, get possible tickets and forged tickets to Kerberos, abuse the Kerberos service. So there's the main function of Mimikatz is to gain credentials in in the Windows environment. This is really exceptional, and this is one of the essentials if you're going to try to dive into Active Directory pen testing. Next would be PowerSploit Empire. So this is a post-exploitation framework that most red teamers used way back because of the different techniques already embedded. Again, this is for mostly for Windows Active Directory red teaming tests, because it has these AD bypasses, different code execution vulnerabilities within the AD, how you're going to exfiltrate data within the Active Directory, try to get domain controllers, try to get domain admin. So this is one of the red team tools that are used way back. It's not, I don't think it's that much used up till now, until now, because most AVs have improved, and Windows AMSI has improved also. There are also the presence of EDRs, so if they use PowerSploit Empire on engagements or red team engagements, it's more likely to get caught rather than to successfully compromise further the Active Directory network. Right, so overall, we're going to go to the penetration testing approach. So we have 5 different methodologies that have been the life cycle for pen testing and hacking in general. So there's first one is information gathering, or recon. As you all know, information is very vital when you're trying to hack a system. You're not going to attack unless you know more about your enemy, right? So you know more about your target. The more you know, the more dangerous it's going to be for them. The more vulnerabilities you can leverage, the more attack vectors you can think of. Overall, every single penetration test involves in how you gather your information, what information is readily available to you, and from there you can base different vulnerabilities. So going on to the next is vulnerability identification. So after you've got your different information from your recon, you can now proceed to identify multiple vulnerabilities within the system that you're targeting. And once you identify these vulnerabilities, you proceed to exploitation and try to gain access. After gaining access, you proceed to post-exploitation, which is mainly establish persistence, exfiltration of data, so that you don't have to run the exploit again and again, and you'll have a more secure way of reaccessing the target machine if ever your shell dies. And then after post-exploitation, of course, you're going to report this, because as you all know, over here we're ethical. So you report these vulnerabilities, of course, together with the proof of concepts if you successfully exploited and leveraged that vulnerability. So overall, these 5 steps, these are going to be your life cycle when you're doing pen testing or when you're doing hacking in general. This applies to everything. This applies to all. It's going to be your bread and butter into getting that first box. So information gathering. As you can see, there are various ways of gathering information. For example, over here, you use nmap to map the different ports, different services. Um, Over here, we can see uh, the change log of a Drupal stack that says there's multiple security issues that have been fixed. You can also see that the date is 2016, so which means it's very outdated. The next is the penetration testing approach. So after you get your recon, uh, you do the search for your vulnerabilities, right? So you search uh, Apache exploits, Drupal exploits. There's a lot. So the one we saw earlier was running 2016. The patch is over here is released 2018. So since it's using a 2016 version, and the Drupal changelog states that the version is vulnerable, we now have our identified vulnerability. Now we can try to use this exploit, and over here, as you can see on the yellow highlight, code execution worked. So it means that the exploit worked, and we are now going to be able to access the machine remotely. So after uh, post exploitation includes exfiltration of data, setting up persistence, privilege escalation. So over here, you can see that after connection, the remote connection has been made. We're trying to figure out what files we can open. We can try what permissions are there for us. So over here you can see important documents we have no permission over, so we need to escalate privileges into an admin. So we proceed to identification of vulnerabilities again. So we now know the stack because we have access to the system. So over here we need to check the operating system version if there are any ways to privilege escalate our local privileges on the machine. So upon searching exploit EV, we can find that there's an overlay FS local privilege escalation technique exploit that's readily available. Since it fits with our Linux kernel version and our Ubuntu version, we can try to use this. So after compiling and executing the exploit, we can see over here that we are root. So our escalation worked. We are now the highest level of user in a Linux system. So we can now have access to important documents. We now own the system. So basically, this is going to be a roadmap. This is going to be your bread and butter. This is going to be your usual methodology. This is going to be what's going to be on your mind, what's going to be your everyday process as you practice. And after that, you can take certifications if you have time and money. I mean, why not, right? So there's a lot of tracks within the infosec industry. You can go for offensive, defensive operations, go management, analysis, implementation. So all of these are very broad. Again, you can take these certifications as a baseline for you if you actually if you want external validation that you are an expert in this topic, or you are a professional in this topic. It's not required, but it's good to have. Right, so that's basically my talk. I'm going to go over and show you a couple of things. Over here I have a hands-on example of the tools that I mentioned. So we have a metasploitable box over here that we are currently running, and we ran an nmap scan against it. So nmap released different information. So there's FTP service, VSFTP v234. There's SSH running, Telnet. There's SMTP, and then there's DNS and an HTTP server. So there are a lot of ports open that can be leveraged, right? So we can also see the service versions. So apart from that, there's also different directories on the web page. So this is derb, right? So there are